It was a Tuesday in early spring, a night thick with a damp chill that seeped into my patrol car even with the heater blasting. I'm Officer Ben Carter, 6 years on the force in a quiet, mostly suburban district known more for its HOA disputes than violent crime. My partner, Miller, was a by-the-book guy, meticulous to a fault, which usually meant our shifts were predictably uneventful. But that night, as we cruised down Elmwood, a call came through dispatch that prickled the hairs on my neck. A 911 hang-up from a house known for its immaculate appearance and its notoriously private owner, a woman in her late 50s named Mrs. Albright. No history of trouble, no domestic calls, nothing that indicated why a silent distress signal would come from such a place. Miller and I exchanged a glance. Usually hang-ups were pocket dials or kids playing a prank, but something about the stillness of Mrs. Albright's pristine colonial as we pulled up felt off. The porch light was on, casting a warm, deceptive glow, but every window was dark, and a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the well-manicured rose bushes flanking the front door. We approached cautiously, our flashlights putting through the humid night, the only sound the soft crunch of our boots on the gravel path. Miller gave 3 firm knocks, announcing our presence. "Police, Mrs. Albright, we received a call from this address. Is everything all right?" There was a long silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of power lines. Just as he was about to knock again, the door slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to open, not swung wide by human hand, but drifting inward as if pulled by an invisible thread.
No one was visible in the dimly lit entryway, only the faint scent of lavender and something else, something cloying and metallic, like old pennies left too long in a damp jar, reached us. My hand instinctively went to my sidearm, while Miller's grip on his flashlight tightened. Every fiber of my being screamed that this wasn't an accidental hang-up, nor a typical domestic disturbance. The kind of silence that greeted us wasn't empty. It was pregnant with a hidden presence, a malevolent anticipation that whispered from the shadowed corners of the immaculate foyer. We called out again, "Mrs. Albright, are you home?" The silence deepened, becoming a heavy blanket pressing down on us, stifling the normal night sounds, leaving us in a vacuum of dread. Stepping inside, our flashlights cut through the gloom, revealing a perfectly ordered yet eerily lifeless living room to our right. Dust motes danced in our beams.
Disturbed, but nothing but our entry. The metallic smell intensified, making my stomach churn. "Clear?" Miller murmured, sweeping his light across antique furniture draped in white dust covers, each one standing like a silent sentinel. The air grew colder as we moved deeper into the house, a sudden drop in temperature that had no logical explanation on a mild spring night. We moved towards the kitchen, guided by a faint flickering light, too soft to be house lights, too irregular to be a malfunctioning appliance. As we rounded the corner into the kitchen, the sight that greeted us was not one of violence, but of chilling stillness. Mrs. Albright was there, seated at her kitchen table, perfectly upright, a teacup in her hand. Her eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead, but utterly vacant, lifeless. Her skin was ashen, almost translucent, and a single petrified tear tracked a path down her cheek, frozen in time.
She wasn't breathing. Her teacup was poised mid-air, a macabre tableau. But it was what was reflected in her still, open eyes that sent a cold wave of terror through me. My flashlight beam danced across her pupils, and for a split second, I saw it. A faint, indistinct reflection of a figure standing directly behind her. It was tall, impossibly thin, its form blurring at the edges as if perpetually shifting. Its face, or what I could glimpse of it, was a dark, featureless void, a dark smudge against the muted background of the kitchen. Miller saw it too. His sharp intake of breath was audible in the heavy silence. We both spun around, weapons drawn, our flashlights sweeping wildly. But there was nothing. Only the still kitchen, the perfectly set table, and Mrs. Albright, forever caught in her last silent moment. The temperature plummeted further, and the metallic scent was now overpowering, making my throat tighten. The sense of being watched was almost suffocating, a silent, predatory gaze from an unseen entity that lingered just beyond the edge of our perception. We called for backup, our voices strained, betraying the raw fear that clawed at our throats. Dispatch, Unit 21, we have a deceased female at 1247 Elmwood. Possible suspicious circumstances. Requesting forensics and additional units immediately. My voice cracked on the last word. The dispatcher's calm, professional tone was a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in my mind. For the next hour, Miller and I stood guard, our backs to the wall, flashlights trained on every shadow, every corner. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of the wind outside sounded like the shifting of that unseen presence, moving silently around us, assessing us, waiting. We didn't dare turn our backs on Mrs. Albright, knowing what we had seen in her lifeless eyes. The feeling of vulnerability was profound, an unsettling awareness that we were in a space where the rules of the physical world were suspended, where an invisible entity had claimed a life without leaving a single tangible mark. When forensics and the coroner finally arrived, the house felt subtly different, as if the unseen presence had receded, leaving behind only the lingering chill and the phantom scent of copper pennies. The crime scene investigators were baffled. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, no cause of death that could be immediately determined, no marks, no wounds, no obvious trauma. It was as if Mrs. Albright had simply stopped. But Miller and I knew what we saw, or rather what we didn't see but was reflected. We described the figure in her eyes, the sudden temperature drop, the metallic smell. The lead detective, a grizzled veteran named Ramirez, listened patiently, his face unreadable, but I could tell from the way his eyes flickered towards Mrs. Albright's still form that he, too, felt the weight of the inexplicable. He'd seen enough in his career to know that some cases simply didn't fit into neat boxes, leaving behind an unsettling residue of unanswered questions and lingering dread. The investigation stretched for weeks, then months, eventually culminating in a finding of death by natural causes, cause undetermined, a bureaucratic shrug that left both Miller and me deeply unsettled. Ramirez told us privately that the ME couldn't find a single thing wrong with Mrs. Albright's body, no disease, no poisons, nothing, as if her spirit had simply been
extracted. He also mentioned, in a low voice, that the surveillance cameras from the street, positioned to catch package thefts, had captured nothing unusual, no figures entering or leaving the house in the hours leading up to our arrival, just the usual street traffic, reinforcing the unsettling notion of an invisible intruder. The case became one of those files that sit in the dark corners of the precinct's archives, only occasionally pulled out by a new detective looking for a challenge, only to be closed again with a frustrated sigh. The perfect, undisturbed nature of the scene belied the profound wrongness that permeated the house, leaving a void that no logical explanation could fill. Miller transferred to a different precinct a few months later, citing personal reasons, though I knew it was the silent witness that drove him away. He never spoke about that night again, but I saw the shadows in his eyes, the way he flinched at sudden movements, the heightened vigilance that bordered on paranoia. For me, the experience ingrained a new kind of awareness, a constant vigilance for the subtle cues, the unseen tremors that signal something profoundly wrong beneath a placid surface. I learned to trust the whispers of my gut more than the cold, hard facts of a crime scene. Sometimes the most terrifying threats are the ones that leave no fingerprints, no struggle, just a lingering chill and the profound, unsettling sense of an invisible predator. The weight of that unseen entity's presence became a silent companion during my night shifts, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the mundane and the truly horrifying, always lurking just out of sight, waiting. I still drive past Mrs. Albright's house sometimes. It remains as immaculate as ever, the rose bushes blooming on schedule, the porch light always on, a beacon of normalcy in the quiet suburban street. But now it feels less like a home and more like a mausoleum, a monument to a silent, inexplicable end. The new owners, a young couple with 2 kids, moved in a year ago, oblivious to the lingering dread that permeates the foundation. I often wonder if they ever smell that faint, metallic scent of copper pennies, or if they ever feel a sudden, inexplicable chill in their perfectly warmed living room, a fleeting shadow at the edge of their vision. I hope not. Some things are better left unseen, unheard, and unacknowledged. The memory of Mrs. Albright's vacant eyes reflecting the absence of something truly terrifying remains etched in my mind, a permanent scar from a night when the silence spoke louder than any scream, and the unseen left the most indelible mark. The incident profoundly altered my perception of my job, shifting my focus from merely enforcing laws to recognizing the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in reality that hint at a deeper, darker layer of existence. The badge on my chest felt heavier, not from its physical weight, but from the invisible burden of knowing that some horrors operate beyond the reach of handcuffs and legal statutes. I became acutely attuned to the nonverbal cues from victims, the way their eyes would dart, the unconscious tremor in their hands, understanding that sometimes their fear was not just of the immediate aggressor, but of something far more insidious, something that lingered in the shadows, waiting. Mrs. Albright's house serves as a chilling reminder that the world holds secrets beyond our comprehension, that evil can sometimes present itself not with a bang, but with a silent, devastating stillness, leaving behind only questions and an enduring, bone-deep chill.
The blizzard hit our little Wyoming town like a freight train that Friday night in January. Power lines snapped like twigs, plunging everything into a suffocating darkness. I'm Sarah Vance, a 911 dispatcher, and usually these nights are pure chaos. Fallen trees, fender benders, burst pipes. But this one was different. The silence was absolute, heavy, almost spiritual, broken only by the crackle of the emergency radio. Around 3:17 a.m., with the snow still piling up against the windows of the dispatch center, a call came through on an old landline that shouldn't have been working. Our entire sector was down, communication lines severed. The caller ID was a garbled mess, static-laced, but the line was undeniably active. My blood ran cold, a premonition settling in my gut. On the other end, a child's voice, small and wavering, whispered, "Hello? Is anyone there? My light went out." "Yes, honey, I'm here. This is 911, I responded, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hand. "What's your name? Where are you calling from?" The voice hesitated, then said, "My name is Lily. I'm at 782 Aspen Ridge. Mommy says I shouldn't be on the phone, but it's so dark, and the closet door, it keeps opening." Aspen Ridge was miles out of town, a remote, wooded area where houses were few and far between, and even in good weather, response times were slow. With the blizzard, it was practically unreachable. I felt a surge of helplessness, a chilling echo of the Colorado 911 operator's impossible call, a spectral premonition that something far beyond the natural was at play. The static on the line intensified, a low hum that seemed to pulse with the child's ragged breathing. And then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic scratching sound, like fingernails dragging across wood, coming from Lily's end of the line. "Lily, can you tell me what you hear? What's opening?" I asked, trying to keep her focused, desperately hoping I could get an address out of her before the impossible connection failed. "The closet door," she whispered again, her voice barely audible over the scratching that was growing louder, more insistent. "It's cold in here now, and it smells funny, like when the deer died last fall, Daddy said." The smell of decay, even through a telephone line, was a horrifying detail, lending an unsettling authenticity to the call that defied its impossible origin. The scratching escalated to a scraping, then a heavy thud, as if something large was pressing against the door. I could hear Lily whimpering, her small breaths coming in short, sharp gasps, mixed with the chilling sound of wood groaning under pressure. The line crackled with a life of its own, mirroring the escalating tension, making it feel less like a call and more like a direct conduit into a nightmare unfolding in a dark, unreachable home. "Lily, I need you to go to your mommy and daddy now. Can you do that for me?" I urged, my voice laced with an urgency I couldn't hide. "No," she whimpered. They're sleeping. They won't wake up." Her voice was now punctuated by loud, sickening thumps, each one making my heart leap into my throat. The image of the deputy in the Wisconsin woods flashed in my mind, the unnatural sounds, the feeling of being lured. The thumping was deliberate, slow and heavy, like something trying to break free. Then, a low, guttural moan echoed through the line, a sound that was not human, not animal, but something primordial and deeply wrong. It was followed by a chilling, wet sound, like something being dragged across a rough surface, accompanied by Lily's small, desperate gasps. The silence after that sound was the most terrifying of all, thick and suffocating, devoid of the child's breathing, leaving only the persistent, impossible static. "Lily? Lily, are you there?" I demanded, my voice cracking, pounding my console in frustration. Only static. The line went dead with a soft pop, leaving my ears ringing with the phantom sounds of the struggle. I immediately tried to re-establish the connection, but the system simply showed a disconnected line, just as it had done for the entire sector. It was an impossible call, a ghost signal, yet it had been so real, so terrifyingly vivid. My shift supervisor, a grizzled old-timer named Dave, watched me with a puzzled frown, having heard my end of the frantic one-sided conversation. He looked at the dead comms screen, then back at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of concern and disbelief. I relayed the details, the address, the sounds, the impossible connection, the child's chilling description of her parents. His professional skepticism warred with the undeniable fact that I had just had a conversation with someone, or something, from a completely blacked-out, unreachable zone. Dave, despite his skepticism, put out a call to the county sheriff, a former Marine known for his no-nonsense approach. He dispatched 2 units, knowing full well it would be hours before they could even attempt to reach Aspen Ridge through the impassable snowdrifts. We both knew it was a futile gesture, a mere formality, but the sheer terror in my voice, the raw conviction with which I had described the impossible call, left no room for dismissal. The hours dragged by, filled with the usual mundane storm-related calls from the few areas that still had power, but my mind was fixated on Lily, on the thumping, on the profound wrongness of that call. I kept replaying the child's voice, the cadence of her whispers, the rising terror, trying to find some logical explanation, some crack in the impossible facade. But there was none. It was a direct line into an unfolding nightmare, a chilling performance for an unseen audience, leaving me as the sole, helpless witness. At dawn, with the blizzard finally breaking, the first sheriff's unit reached Aspen Ridge. It was a long, arduous trek, requiring snowmobiles for the last few miles. Deputy Reynolds, his voice muffled by static, radioed back their findings. Dispatch, we're at 782 Aspen Ridge. House is dark. Front door appears to have been forced inward, not by snow, something heavy. No signs of life visible from outside. Proceeding with caution. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it, the culmination of the impossible, the confirmation of the horrifying. I held my breath, dreading the next words, knowing they would either bring relief or shatter my remaining composure. The silence that followed felt like an eternity, filled only with the relentless hum of the dispatch center and the frantic pounding of my own heartbeat against my ribs. The weight was unbearable, a silent torture that pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. After what felt like an hour, Reynolds' voice crackled back, strained and tight. Dispatch, we have 2 adults, deceased, in the master bedroom. Appears to be blunt force trauma. And the smell, dispatch. It's like a slaughterhouse in here. Then his voice dropped to a whisper, filled with an undeniable tremor. No sign of a child, dispatch. No sign of anyone else. But the closet door in the little girl's room, it's completely ripped off its hinges, splintered wood everywhere. And there are deep gouge marks on the floor, leading from the closet into the wall. My blood ran cold, matching the impossible silence on the other end. The closet door, the scratching, the thumping. The truth, or at least a glimpse of it, was far more terrifying than I could have imagined. The raw, primal fear in Reynolds' voice resonated with my own, confirming that they had stumbled upon something truly anomalous, something that defied all logical explanation. The investigation officially found the parents victims of an unknown assailant, a disappearance of the child listed, a missing person case with no leads. But the coroner found no human DNA beyond the parents, no footprints in the snow leading away from the house, nothing that explained how the door was forced or where Lily had gone, or what caused the grotesque damage to the closet. The snow around the house was pristine, unbroken, a silent, damning witness to an impossible crime. I never stopped thinking about that call, about Lily's small voice, the thumping, the smell of decay. I transferred out of dispatch a year later, unable to shake the pervasive feeling that somewhere out there, something was still waiting in the dark, something that had learned how to use a disconnected landline to lure help that would never arrive. The raw, primal fear of that night lingers, a chilling reminder that some horrors transcend the physical, operating in the silent, dark spaces between the lines.
I'm Officer David Rossi, and for 17 years, my beat was the graveyard shift at the county records office in upstate New York. Not exactly frontline police work, I know. My job was to patrol the sprawling, antiquated building filled with dusty files dating back to the town's founding, a labyrinth of forgotten histories. Most nights were spent sipping lukewarm coffee and listening to the building creak, settling into its age. But there was one section, Archive B, that always felt different. It housed the cold cases, the unsolved, the ones that had simply vanished from public memory. It was always colder in that wing, and the air held a peculiar stillness, a sense of heavy, unresolved gravity. I'd heard the whispers among the older officers about strange occurrences down there, flickering lights, phantom whispers, but I'd always dismissed them as old wives' tales, the product of too many quiet nights and overactive imaginations. Until last summer, when the whispers became something far more tangible. It started subtly, a feeling of being watched when I was in Archive B, the kind of prickling sensation on the back of your neck that makes you spin around, only to find nothing. Then came the small disturbances, a file drawer left ajar that I swore I'd closed, a stack of boxes meticulously rearranged overnight, always in Archive B. I'd checked the security footage expecting to find a janitor or a new clerk, but the cameras always showed the same thing. Nothing. Just me alone in the vast, silent building and the unsettling impression that someone or something was moving just beyond the camera's limited field of vision, or perhaps beyond what the lens could truly capture. It reminded me of the Michigan officer who found a mysterious woman in his precinct's archived footage, a persistent, unseen presence tied to cold cases. The feeling of being monitored was constant, an unnerving, palpable weight in the oppressive silence of the records office. One night, while doing my rounds, I heard a faint, melancholic humming emanating from the far end of Archive B, near the oldest, most forgotten files. It was a tune I didn't recognize, ancient and sorrowful, a sound that seemed to resonate deep within the very stone of the building. I approached cautiously, my flashlight beam cutting through the dim aisle, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" The humming stopped abruptly, replaced by a soft, almost imperceptible rustle, like old paper shifting in an unseen breeze. I swept my light across the shelves, illuminating rows upon rows of sealed, forgotten boxes, each containing the fragmented remnants of a life, a story, a tragedy. There was nothing. Yet the air in that section was thick with an emotional residue, a profound sense of sorrow that settled over me, heavy and suffocating. It was as if the very walls absorbed the unspoken grief and desperation of the forgotten cases. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A single file, heavy with age, had been pulled out halfway from its slot on a shelf dedicated to cases from the 1950s. Its label, in faded ink, read, Case 1957-003, Eleanor Vance, Missing Person. My heart hammered. I had never touched this file, never even known it existed. Intrigued, and against my better judgment, I pulled it out completely. Inside, the pages were brittle, yellowed with time, filled with handwritten notes and grainy black and white photographs of a young woman with kind eyes and a faint, hopeful smile, a stark contrast to the profound sadness that now permeated the archive. The case was simple. Eleanor, a local school teacher, had vanished without a trace from a picnic in the woods, leaving behind only a discarded blanket and a half-eaten sandwich. No suspects, no body, just an eternal blank space in the town's history. The sense of an unseen hand guiding me to this specific, long-forgotten tragedy was unnerving, a chilling echo of the Sunset Motel case where a child's spirit seemed to draw officers to its tragic past.
I spent the rest of that night reading the file, poring over every detail, every dead-end lead. The last entry was a detective's frustrated scrawl. No further avenues of inquiry. Case closed indefinitely. But there was a small, almost invisible note tucked into the back, a single line in different handwriting, delicate and almost elegant, a stark contrast to the official reports. She walks the silent halls, seeking her truth. No signature, no context. The next morning, I returned the file, but the feeling of being watched intensified, a lingering presence that seemed to follow me even outside Archive B. The humming resumed the following night, sometimes faint, sometimes closer, always just beyond the reach of my flashlight, always seeming to emanate from the vicinity of Eleanor Vance's file. It was as if the entity was communicating, trying to bring attention to the forgotten, to reveal a truth buried deep within the annals of the past. The disturbances escalated. Files would fall from shelves, scattering across the floor like dominoes, always in Archive B, always near Eleanor's case. Once I found a single red rose, perfectly preserved but impossibly old, resting on top of her file. A bloom of vibrant color against the faded yellow of the paper. There was no source for it in the building, no outside access that could explain its presence. My rational mind struggled to find a logical explanation, but my gut told me I was dealing with something beyond the mundane. A spectral sentinel, a guardian of forgotten stories, perhaps Eleanor herself trapped in the limbo of an unresolved existence, tirelessly trying to reveal her truth. The relentless, inexplicable phenomena chipped away at my composure, eroding my skepticism and replacing it with a creeping dread that permeated every quiet moment of my shift. One particularly quiet night, the temperature in Archive B dropped to near freezing, and a sudden violent gust of wind ripped through the seemingly sealed room, scattering papers everywhere. As I struggled to collect them, my flashlight beam flickered, then died, plunging me into absolute darkness. In the suffocating black, I heard it, clear as day, a woman's voice, a mournful whisper, right next to my ear. He walks among the trees. He knows my name. The voice was filled with an unbearable sorrow, a profound sense of loss. When my flashlight flickered back on, the voice was gone, but the room felt different, lighter, as if a great weight had been momentarily lifted. I found myself standing directly in front of Eleanor Vance's file, now wide open, its contents spilled across the floor, and a single faded photograph of a man I didn't recognize. His face, partially obscured by shadow, had fallen on top. A chilling clue, a potential lead from decades past. I meticulously re-examined Eleanor's file, looking for any connection to a man in the woods. There was nothing. But the phrase, "he walks among the trees," kept replaying in my mind. The next morning, I took the photograph to a retired detective, a local history buff named Old Man Hemlock, who had a prodigious memory for the town's obscure past. He stared at the photo, his eyes narrowing. "That's Arthur Billings. Used to own the lumber mill on the edge of town near where Eleanor went missing. Strange bird. Died in a logging accident a few years after she disappeared. Always a suspect, but nothing ever stuck." My blood ran cold. The spectral sentinel, the guardian of the archives, had delivered a message from beyond the grave, pointing to a long-forgotten lead and almost certainly unattainable truth. The sheer impossibility of the situation was overwhelming, yet the pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision, a silent accusation spanning decades. I submitted an unofficial report, a suspicious activity form, detailing the bizarre occurrences and the new lead, knowing it would likely be dismissed. But I felt a strange sense of completion, of having fulfilled an ancient request. The phenomena in Archive B tapered off after that night. The humming became less frequent, the temperature returned to normal, and no more files were disturbed. It was as if the sentinel, having delivered its message, had finally found a measure of peace. I still patrol the archives at night, but the dread has been replaced with a quiet respect, a recognition of the unseen forces that linger in the forgotten spaces of human history, guarding their secrets, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. The weight of the old building, once a physical burden, now felt like a silent, solemn trust, a responsibility to those whose stories remained untold. The experience completely reshaped my understanding of justice, extending it beyond the living to encompass the echoes of the past, the silent pleas of the forgotten. I realized that some cases never truly close, not until the truth, however elusive, is acknowledged. Archive B, once merely a repository of old paper, transformed into a sacred space, a nexus where the living and the dead converged on the silent threads of unresolved tragedy. I still glance towards that section, sometimes imagining Eleanor Vance's hopeful face among the dust motes, a silent testament to a life brutally cut short, and the relentless, spectral pursuit of a truth that demanded to be heard even across the chasm of decades.
The summer heat in rural Texas clings to you like a second skin, even at 2 a.m. My name is Detective Elena Ramirez, and I'd been working auto theft in this quiet corner of the state for almost a decade. It was usually pretty straightforward. Joy rides, insurance scams, the occasional chop shop bust. But the cold that came in that sweltering August night was anything but. The state trooper had found an abandoned semi-truck on a deserted stretch of Highway 287 just outside our jurisdiction. The cab was empty, keys in the ignition, but the trailer was unlocked, its contents spilled out onto the desolate shoulder. And what those contents were immediately elevated this to a level of horror I hadn't encountered in my career. It was a collection, meticulously organized, of stolen human experiences. The first thing that hit me when I arrived was the sheer volume. Dozens of binders, each one filled with photographs meticulously labeled. Not just pictures of people, but candid shots of them and their daily lives. At the grocery store, walking their dog, laughing with friends at a park. Each binder corresponded to a different individual, their name and basic bio neatly printed on the spine. It was a chilling, voyeuristic archive, a meticulous collection of stolen moments. The air around the truck felt heavy, charged with a profound sense of violation, a quiet hum of unseen observation. The moonlight cast long, eerie shadows across the highway, transforming the familiar landscape into something alien and menacing, enhancing the profound sense of wrongness that emanated from the abandoned semi. As forensics processed the scene, we found more. Along with the binders, there were recording devices, tiny, sophisticated microphones and cameras, some still active, picking up the distant sounds of cicadas. There were also various personal effects, a woman's favorite coffee mug, a child's worn teddy bear, a man's distinctive wristwatch, all seemingly insignificant items, yet each one resonated with a chilling intimacy. It wasn't just observation, it was possession, a grotesque appropriation of personal history. The sheer scale of the operation, The meticulousness of the collection spoke of a mind that was not merely criminal, but deeply, terrifyingly disturbed, driven by an obsessive need to possess and control the very essence of human existence, to distill lives into cold, clinical data. Then one of the technicians discovered a hidden compartment beneath the false floor of the trailer. Inside, neatly stacked, were a series of intricately carved wooden boxes. Each box was sealed, and when we managed to pry one open, we found it filled with what appeared to be human memories. Not literally, of course, but physical manifestations intended to represent them. Small, perfectly rendered miniature dioramas of everyday scenes. A first kiss under a lamppost, a child's birthday party, a quiet moment reading a book by the window. Each diorama was accompanied by a meticulously handwritten note describing the corresponding emotion or memory, as if cataloging a collection of captured souls. The detail was exquisite, terrifyingly precise, an undeniable testament to a chilling artistry. The effect was profoundly unsettling. It wasn't just stolen property, it was stolen life. The more we uncovered, the deeper the rabbit hole went. One box contained a small, tarnished silver locket, and its accompanying note read, "The day she lost her mother, the smell of copper pennies in the hospital room." My blood ran cold, instantly recalling the Colorado dispatcher's impossible call, the dead man's voice, the chilling mention of that same metallic scent. It wasn't just a collection, it was a reenactment, a macabre reliving of someone else's profound pain and loss. The level of detail, the choice of such specific, deeply personal memories suggested a predator that didn't merely watch but infiltrated the lives of their victims, absorbing their most intimate moments, their most vulnerable states, transforming them into trophies and a chilling internal museum.
The FBI was called in immediately. This wasn't just theft. It was psychological warfare on an unprecedented scale, a chilling exploration of human vulnerability. Agent Miller, a stoic woman from the Behavioral Analysis Unit, described it as a collector of essences. Her face, usually unreadable, was etched with a profound sense of unease. "This isn't about material gain," she said, gesturing to the binders and boxes. "It's about ultimate control, about owning the internal world of another human being. It's a signature, a statement, and it's evolving." Her words painted a terrifying picture of a meticulous, calculating predator, reminiscent of the Elena Koff abductor from Austin, who meticulously planned her victims' disappearances. The thought of such a mind, meticulously documenting and categorizing human experience, sent a shiver down my spine, a profound unease that settled deep in my bones. Among the hundreds of items, we found one binder that contained only a single blurry photograph. It was a picture of a dense, shadowy forest, and a handwritten note beneath it read, "The sound of laughter in the dark, the lure into the deep." The hair on my arm stood up. It was a terrifying echo of the Wisconsin deputies' encounter in the woods, the unnatural crying and laughter that drew them deeper into a sinister trap. This wasn't just a collector. This was someone with a profound understanding of human fear, of primal instincts, someone who reveled in the subtle manipulation of others, drawing them into their own private, terrifying world. The scattered references to other unsettling incidents, the inexplicable details, began to weave a tapestry of interconnected horrors, hinting at a singular, malevolent force operating across vast distances, a terrifying puppet master pulling unseen strings. For weeks, we pursued every lead, every possible connection. The semi-truck was stolen from a depot in New Mexico, but the surveillance on the owner, a man named Silas Blackwood, revealed nothing. He was a phantom, leaving no digital footprint, no social media presence, a ghost in the machine. He was described by acquaintances as a brilliant recluse, a master of observation who vanished without a trace after a series of strange, unsettling incidents in his past. The sheer lack of any conventional trail was baffling, making him more like a myth than a man. The FBI theorized he used the stolen identities of those whose essences he collected, living an unseen life within the shadows of other people's stolen histories, becoming a living embodiment of the void he created in their lives. The case remains open, one of those phantom files that haunts the deepest corners of the Bureau. The highway collector, as the media dubbed him, vanished as silently as he appeared, leaving behind only the chilling evidence of his macabre hobby. Sometimes, when I'm driving alone on a deserted stretch of highway late at night, I feel it. The unseen gaze, the distinct sense of being observed, analyzed, categorized. I wonder if my own essence has been added to his chilling collection, a series of photographs and dioramas meticulously documenting my life, my fears, my memories. The thought is enough to make the Texas night air feel like ice against my skin, a stark reminder that some predators hunt not for blood, but for something far more intimate, far more profound, leaving behind only the chilling emptiness of a stolen self. The experience has irrevocably changed the way I view the world, transforming the mundane into a potential stage for unseen observation and the familiar into something subtly menacing. I find myself scrutinizing details, searching for the telltale signs of the unseen observer, the subtle shifts that indicate a hidden presence. The world feels thinner now, more permeable, with the chilling understanding that the most profound violations can occur without a single physical mark, leaving behind only the chilling emptiness of a stolen essence. The highway collector serves as a constant, terrifying reminder that some evils operate not with a bang, but with a silent, meticulous collection, transforming the vibrant tapestry of human life into a cold, cataloged museum of appropriated souls.
I'm Officer David Miller, 7 years on the force in Blackwood Falls, Vermont. It's the kind of place where the biggest crime on a Friday night is usually a drunk deer wandering onto Main Street. My shifts were, for the most part, predictably dull. Noise complaints, the occasional fender bender, welfare checks on elderly residents who sometimes forgot to turn off their porch lights. I chose this quiet life after a stint in a much larger, harsher city, craving the peace and predictability. Blackwood Falls offered that, or so I thought, until a routine archival review shattered every notion of normalcy I held. It started insidiously, a whisper of unease building into a crescendo of unnerving clarity, slowly peeling back the veneer of quietude that defined our little precinct. I was digging through old surveillance footage from our main lobby, tracing the movements of a suspect from a cold theft case, something long forgotten by everyone but the records department, trying to find a pattern or a discarded clue that might breathe new life into a stale investigation. The hours were ticking by, the fluorescent hum of the break room the only sound, when I saw her. She was just a flicker at first, in the corner of the frame, near the old coffee machine that hadn't worked in years. A woman, slender, dressed in what looked like a dark, plain coat, her long, straight black hair falling past her shoulders. She stood completely still, facing the wall, almost pressed against it as if trying to blend into the muted tones of the institutional paint. It was 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, according to the timestamp, a time when our small precinct was typically a ghost town, manned only by a single dispatcher and the occasional patrolling officer returning for paperwork. No one else was visible in the frame, and her presence was entirely out of place. We have strict visitor logs, especially overnight, and I knew for a fact no one had signed in at that hour. My first thought was a glitch, a digital artifact, or maybe someone I hadn't recognized, though that seemed unlikely given how small our community was. I rewound,
played it again, zoomed in. The image sharpened slightly, enough to confirm her form, her quiet stillness, but her face remained stubbornly indistinct, perpetually turned away or obscured by shadow, as if the camera itself couldn't quite resolve her features, refusing to grant full recognition. My curiosity, a cop's natural instinct to question what doesn't fit, compelled me to dig deeper. I pulled footage from other days, other weeks, even months from the same archival period, and there she was again. Not always in the same spot, but always in that same odd peripheral way. Sometimes she was near the rarely used back exit, standing by the fire alarm panel, her back to the camera, a silent sentinel. Other times she materialized near the evidence locker, her presence a stark, unsettling contrast to the sterile environment. What struck me, what really started to chill me, was the consistency. Her posture, her clothes, the length of her hair, always identical. And she never moved, not a twitch, not a shift of weight, just absolute unnatural stillness. The other officers would walk past her, sometimes within mere feet, completely oblivious, never glancing her way, never acknowledging her presence, as if she existed on a different plane, visible to the lens, but unseen by the living. A phantom woven into the digital fabric of our security system, an anomaly that defied every logical explanation. The more I looked, the more I found her. My days off became self-imposed surveillance missions. I started pulling older tapes going back years, ignoring the scornful glances from colleagues who thought I was losing my mind or perhaps just wasting valuable precinct resources on a ghost story. The pattern emerged, stark and terrifying. She appeared consistently in the footage captured around specific unsolved cases, not just cold cases, but the truly unsolved ones, the baffling disappearances, the unclosed files that haunted our department's past. She was there during the initial intake of the missing hiker report from 2018, standing by the chief's office. She was in the background of the footage from the night the Old Town historian's house was ransacked without a single print left behind. It was like she was a silent witness to every mystery, every unresolved question, haunting the periphery of our failures, an unsettling observer whose very presence screamed of a deeper, inexplicable connection to the things we couldn't explain, the loose ends we couldn't tie up.
I tried to get a second opinion, casually showing stills to Malcolm, our grizzled veteran detective who'd seen it all. He peered at the photos, his brow furrowed, then shook his head, muttering something about bad camera focus or trick of the light. Younger officers chuckled, asking if I was seeing things, if the night shift was finally getting to me. One even suggested a prank. But their dismissals only solidified my conviction. If she was a prank, why was no one taking credit? If she was a glitch, why was she so consistent across different cameras and years? The isolation of my discovery began to weigh on me, making me question my own sanity, even as the undeniable evidence glared back at me from the monitors. It was a bizarre, lonely journey into an unexplained phenomenon, a secret burden that felt increasingly heavy, a truth that no one else was willing or able to see, leaving me adrift in a sea of unsettling observations and growing dread. My only confidant unexpectedly became Captain Evans, an old-school cop nearing retirement. I'd approached him tentatively, almost whispering my findings, expecting a stern lecture about wasting time. Instead, he simply listened, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he walked to a dusty cabinet in his office, retrieved a faded photograph, and laid it on his desk. It was a grainy black and white photo from the early 90s, the old precinct layout, and there she was. Same dark coat, same unnervingly still posture, standing near the old evidence room. Had another officer 20 years back, he murmured, his voice low. Saw her too.
got obsessed, just like you. Said she was always near the forgotten files. Never found a logical explanation. He transferred to another state, never looked back. The captain's words were not a dismissal, but a chilling validation, a confirmation that I wasn't alone in this bizarre discovery, but also a stark warning of the psychological toll it took on those who dared to look too closely. A silent acknowledgement of a shared, unsettling secret that had haunted our precinct for decades, a specter woven into the very fabric of its history. The captain's admission opened a new, terrifying possibility. This wasn't just a recording anomaly. This entity, this phantom observer, seemed to be intrinsically linked to the cases that slipped through our fingers, the victims whose stories remained incomplete. She wasn't just appearing near the cold cases. She was a symptom, perhaps even a guardian of the forgotten. Her presence seemed to emanate a subtle influence, almost a psychic pressure, that ensured certain truths would remain hidden, certain answers perpetually out of reach. It felt like she was protecting the unresolved, an ethereal sentinel of our collective investigative failures. The more I reviewed, the more I noticed a pattern. Whenever she appeared, the related case seemed to hit a dead end shortly after, leads drying up, evidence inexplicably misplaced, witnesses suddenly uncooperative. It was as if her silent vigil perpetuated the very incompleteness that defined her presence, a chilling feedback loop of mystery and omission that had plagued our department for generations. The true terror arrived one particularly quiet Tuesday night. I was alone in the office, reviewing the latest batch of footage from the previous week, specifically the camera monitoring the back entrance, which led directly to the file room for unsolved cases. At precisely 2:47 a.m., she materialized in the frame, standing silently by the fire exit, her back to the camera as usual. But then, slowly, deliberately, her head began to turn. Not a quick snap, but a deliberate, almost graceful pivot until her indistinct face was aimed directly at the lens. The camera feed crackled, then froze for a full 7 seconds, the screen displaying nothing but static. When the image flickered back into life, the hallway was empty. My breath hitched in my throat. This wasn't a glitch. This was an acknowledgement. She knew I was watching. She had seen me through the veil of time and digital signals, and she had responded, her silent gaze breaking the passive boundary of surveillance. Heart pounding, I scrambled from my chair and practically sprinted down the silent hallway, my flashlight beam dancing wildly ahead of me. The hallway was empty, the air still and cold. I reached the back exit door, the fire alarm panel, the very spots where she had appeared countless times. Nothing seemed amiss. No disturbed dust, no strange smells, just the familiar, sterile silence of the precinct at night. But as I reached the heavy, reinforced door of the dead files room, where we stored the oldest, most baffling unsolved cases, I noticed something peculiar. The door, which I had personally locked and double-checked just hours earlier, was ajar by a mere inch. I pushed it open slowly, my hand instinctively dropping to my service weapon. The room was dark, filled with rows of ancient, dust-covered filing cabinets. But on the top of one, precisely from the Blackwood Falls Disappearances section, a single, brittle file lay open. Its cover read only, Case FD 92003, Amelia Stone, unresolved. Inside, tucked under a decades-old witness statement, was a small, crudely drawn sketch of a woman in a dark coat, her face a blank oval,
a haunting mirror image of the figure from the footage.